Hi there. In this lecture I have a super fun example of the Alekhine's defense. Nigel Short against Jan Timman in 1991. This became known as Nigel Short's IMMORTAL game. So a very, very special game. E4, knight f6 is the Alekhine's defense. E5, knight d5, d4, d6, knight f3, g6. This is actually a rather good system for white. Bishop c4, knight b6, bishop b3. White establishes a pawn wedge simply in the center and reinforces it. So queen e2, knight c6, white castles, black castles, and now h3, taking out the possibility of that pin. We see a5, a4, d takes, and now here knight d4 is used. Knight takes, rook e1, e6, pardon me, knight d2, knight d5, knight f3, so supporting the e5 pawn even more. Queen c5, queen e4, and it looks as though there might be an intent here sometimes to switch over here for the attack, maybe with bishop h6 and knight g5 after. So black tries to interfere with white's plans, and we have bishop c4 disconnecting the queen. And is there a downside there? Knight b6. Well, here, very, very interesting move. Nigel Short accepts the possibility of really a compromised pawn structure with the move b3. Now, the threat is also bishop a3 here. So black's options are limited. Knight takes, b takes. So white has an isolated pawn, double pawns, but structure isn't everything. Look at the c8 bishop. Look at the passivity of black's pieces. They're not doing too much. So it's structure versus having a fantastic position. White can also try and possess the only file in the position, the shared file. White can try and aim for possession. This is against moves like bishop a3, getting out of the skewer. If rook d8, this is still useful, bishop a3, for this position. As an example, here, knight h2 is dangerous, knight g4, and there's tactics like knight takes h6 for bishop f8, which is lethal. So it's a dangerous position. If b6, then queen takes a8. So there's limited options. Okay, so black plays rook e8. We see rook d1 trying to control that one file. So it's structure versus brilliant position of the pieces. Queen h4 is played. We see b6, bishop e3, queen c6, bishop h6, bishop h8. Bishop takes h6 would make white's job even easier. Here, knight g5 runs into checkmate on g2, but guess what white could play here as an example, if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. What is a really crushing move which facilitates knight g5 in this variation? Okay, rook d5, yeah, it will disconnect this diagonal. On e takes, we have knight g5 here threatening to checkmate, and this is desperate. White can just win the queen. It's desperate. White's crushing it there. So anyway, bishop h8 was played. We see rook d8, pretty invasive. Bishop b7, the other rook to d1, bishop g7. If rook a takes d8 as an example, this position with f6 trying to disconnect, white can actually just play e takes, and here f7 check, and this is also pretty crushing. For example, check, check, and mate. So bishop g7 was played. We see rook 8 to d7, rook f8. Black is in a super passive position. You can see that one of the goals of an opening in general is to have a decent pawn structure, but here it can't be at the expense of not being able to move anything, essentially, and the king being kind of stuck. And white actually, after bishop takes g7, has these luscious dark squares to play with. So rook 1 to d4, rook e8. We see queen f6 check, king g8. The rook allowed the queen to do this, protecting c4, but now h4 with a big threat of just h5, h6, form pawn and mate. We see h5. So just to put that on the board, if bishop a8, h5, and then h6, and then mating. So the dark squares are perilously weak. And in fact here we see a brilliancy in the making. Guess what white plays here if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. White to play. Okay. King h2. And you might think, King h2, Kingscrusher, what's the idea? The idea is King g3. Is it being spelled out? The king is walking up to h6. Yes, in the middle game, the king is walking up to h6, but will facilitate Queen g7 checkmate. Black is helpless. Bishop c8 is tried. If King h7, Knight g5 check, Knight takes f7 check, is crushing it. For example, here, check and mate. So yeah, and if King g8, then Rook takes f7 is vicious. What is Black doing apart from getting mated? So this is big trouble. Bishop c8, but now King g5 and the game ended here. If Bishop takes d7, then King h6, and it's going to be mate. And if King h7 had been played, guess what White has here? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay. Queen takes g6 check, Queen h6 check, King f6, mating. There is a lesson about pawn structure, I believe, in this game. So let's go to the game end. That your opening decisions, maybe you are going to sometimes have a compromised pawn structure. But, you know, Mikhail Botvinnik was a great experimenter with double pawns in the opening. So this is a great example of also, you know, structure versus having a dominating position when the opponent can't do anything. So, yeah, Black was really in a bind of sorts after Nigel Short's acceptance of Knight b6 here, b3, this situation, where Black seems to be fracturing really quite severely, but White's got so many active pieces and a dominating control of key files that it's actually, you know, Black's king safety is a much larger issue than these double pawns. I think Nigel Short said it himself that modern chess is too much concerned with things like pawn structure, and he said basically checkmate ends the game. This is a vivid demonstration of that comment, that quotation by Nigel Short, that really it's about checkmating quite often, and he literally goes with his king to facilitate a checkmate. Okay, so a beautiful game, very epic game, showing the perils of these dark squares as well around the king, and a modest interpretation, again from an opening perspective, a modest interpretation of just reinforcing the e5 pawn. This is a very nice variation, very simple, very strong, very recommendable variation as well, in my view, against the Alekhine defense. Just play it like this. Be content with a small edge. Not too many downsides with this approach. You get a little bit of a plus without too many downsides. So that small edge, and it can be used brilliantly. It can be reinforced. So bishop c4, queen e2. Yeah, very nice. Okay, thanks so much. All comments, questions, likes and subscribes, really appreciated. Thanks so much.